potestes qualis, quam Deo avus falsa clamor, desturs et est humanavits, qui divum faest et pesenors, creator tuus et Deus alcits, vienende sacerdotur, per la fudeu prime servi, se nu Dio venira ancora, chiamare ferra batto, che salve.
Welcome back to Time Machine Diaries, where we peel back the pages of history to uncover stories that are as twisted, raw, and brutally human as they come. I'm Amelia, your time-traveling guide to the past. Today we're hurtling back to the late 11th century, an era drenched in piety, bloodshed, and a very questionable idea, the First Crusade. Yeah, we're talking about that iconic holy war that started with one of the most infamous rallying cries in history, Pope Urban VI's Deus Vult, and ended in the streets of Jerusalem, slick with blood. Strap in, folks, because this isn't a Sunday school retelling. We're diving headfirst into the sheer chaos of medieval warfare, betrayal, and desperation. The First Crusade is an unflinching tale of knights, peasants, kings, and clergy, all convinced they were doing God's work by spilling as much blood as possible. It's brutal, it's tragic, and yes, it's absurd. So fire up the time machine, because we're about to land smack in the middle of one of the bloodiest religious wars in history. The Pope's Call to Arms. The year is 1095. Europe is a mess. Famine, feudal conflicts, and the general misery of being alive in the Middle Ages. Meanwhile, the Byzantine Empire, a former powerhouse, is being hammered by the Seljuk Turks, who've stormed into Anatolia. Emperor Alexios I Komnenos, desperate for help, sends an SOS to Pope Urban VI. He needs mercenaries, but what he gets is something far bigger and bloodier. Pope Urban VI stands before a massive crowd in Clermont, France. Imagine him, robes billowing, eyes alight with the fervor of a man about to convince an entire continent to go to war. He says, in not so many words, "Hey, Europe, are you tired of killing each other over land and grudges? Well, I've got a better idea. Let's go liberate Jerusalem from the Muslims. You'll get to murder people and call it holy work. Bonus, heaven's fast-track line for anyone who joins." The crowd loses its collective mind. Thousands of voices erupt. Deus Vult! Deus Vult! God wills it. Just like that, a tidal wave of religious fanaticism sweeps across Europe. Knights see an opportunity for glory and plunder. Peasants, sick of their miserable lives, think, sure, why not? What's the worst that can happen? What's the worst? Oh, we're getting to that. The People's Crusade, a March of Madness. The First Crusade doesn't start with knights in shining armor. Nope. It starts with the People's Crusade, led by Peter the Hermit, a man who looks and acts like he hasn't slept in a decade. Picture him, barefoot, scraggly, eyes like a lunatic preacher who's absolutely convinced he's God's chosen mouthpiece. He rallies thousands of peasants, beggars, and anyone dumb enough to believe they can walk to Jerusalem with no money, no weapons, and zero survival skills. These poor bastards march out of Europe like they're on a field trip to salvation. Instead, it turns into a journey straight to hell. They pillage villages along the way because, surprise, there's no supply chain in the 11th century. When they cross into Byzantine territory, they start looting Christian towns, much to Emperor Alexios' annoyance. He's like, wait, these are the reinforcements? Oh, we're screwed. Eventually, they stumble into Anatolia, where the Seljuk Turks are waiting. To call this a battle would be generous. It's a slaughter. The Turks cut through the peasants like a scythe through wheat. Bodies pile up, blood soaks the ground. Peter the Hermit somehow survives, slinking back to safety while his followers are obliterated. Lesson? Maybe don't declare holy war if your army consists of pitchfork-wielding peasants. The Prince's Crusade. The real army shows up. By 1097, the actual knights and nobles known as the Prince's Crusade arrive. These aren't your average ragtag mobs. These guys are armored, trained, and very, very good at killing. Leaders like Godfrey of Bouillon, Bohemond of Taranto, and Raymond of Toulouse command armies that are ready to raise hell for Christendom. Their first big test? Nicaea. This fortress city had already chewed up and spat out the People's Crusade, but the princes aren't about to let that happen. They lay siege with brutal efficiency, cutting off supplies and bombarding the walls. Eventually, the city surrenders, not to the Crusaders, but to the Byzantines, who swoop in and claim it for themselves. The Crusaders are pissed, but they march on, knowing bigger battles await. Antioch, the city of death. By the time they reach Antioch in late 1097, the Crusaders are already weary, starving, and increasingly unhinged. Antioch is a massive fortified city, and the siege lasts for months. Supplies run out, disease ravages the camp. People start eating their horses. And when that's not enough, rumors of cannibalism start swirling. When the city finally falls in June 1098, the Crusaders discover that holding it is just as hard as taking it. A massive Muslim relief force surrounds them, and now they're the ones under siege. Enter Peter Bartholomew, a monk who claims to have visions of the Holy Lance. He says it's buried beneath a local church. Desperation makes the Crusaders believers verse, and when they find the lance, it's just the morale boost they need. Armed with what they believe is divine favor, they sally forth and defeat the larger Muslim force in a chaotic, blood-drenched battle. It's a miracle or a case of sheer dumb luck. Either way, Antioch is theirs, but the cost is astronomical. Jerusalem, the holy city, runs red. Finally, in 1099, the Crusaders reach Jerusalem. By now, they're a shadow of their former strength, malnourished, disease-ridden, and utterly ruthless. They lay siege to the city, building massive towers and battering rams under the blazing summer sun. On July 15th, they breach the walls. What happens next is nothing short of a massacre. The Crusaders kill everyone, Muslims, Jews, even Christians caught in the crossfire.
Stop it, you're killing him!
The streets are slick with blood, the air thick with the stench of death. Chroniclers describe rivers of blood flowing ankle-deep. The carnage is so extreme that even some Crusaders feel a twinge of guilt. But to the victors, it's all justified. They've reclaimed Jerusalem for Christendom, and in their minds, the slaughter was just God's will. Aftermath. Faith and fury. The First Crusade ends in victory for the Crusaders, but at what cost? Tens of thousands are dead. Entire cities are reduced to rubble. And while the Crusaders see themselves as heroes, the Muslim world sees them as ruthless invaders, a grudge that won't be forgotten anytime soon. For the survivors, their place in heaven is supposedly secured. For history, the First Crusade is a brutal reminder of what happens when faith and power collide. Thanks for joining me, Amelia, on Time Machine Diaries. Until next time, remember, history isn't just a collection of dates and names. It's blood, sweat, and humanity in its rawest form. See you on the next journey.
In the name of the Lord, to the glory of the King. Milite Sancti, in fide Constantis, per crucem sacram, virtus vivis. In tenebris luxori tu, Erus vos, Dominus vocavit, non timebimus, cor nostram firmavit. My sword and shield, my prayer and might, the Templars rise for the holy life. Fides nostra, spes et salus, in the name of Christ we march as one, under the banner of the Holy Son.
Per sancta nos vocatim prolia, custodes fidei sub Maria.